All right, everybody. I think I'm here. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Hope everybody had a good weekend last weekend. I had a great weekend. My Rams won Monday night, which is great. I went 1-on-1 with my fantasy teams. I don't know if I told you, but I made a very daring decision with one of my fantasy teams. It's paying off so far. I started off 0-5, now back to 2-5. Gonna make a run for the playoffs, so I'm excited. Hopefully, you guys are having some fun or doing something at least fun in your life. This would be the time in class where I kind of do a recap of what happened over the weekend with all of you, or have found out what happened with some of you. But hey, unfortunately, we can't do this right now. So this is the best we got. So today we're gonna be talking about chapter 4, managing your cash and your savings. Let's get into it. Cash management. That's just simply your routine day-to-day administration of your cash and liquid assets. There's a lot of decisions and choices you can make with how you're going to manage your cash, your checking account, your savings accounts, all that kind of good stuff. So we're going to walk through all of those options. I'm going to have some videos on here as well. So yeah, should be fun. The types of financial institutions that let me see if this will work here. Can I click on these? I think I can, and I think we're still recording. Just for my own good. Yes, we are. I think that worked. So there's a type of financial institutions. There's depository and non-depository. What's the difference between the two? Depository, that's a bank or financial institution that you make a deposit. Think of your regular banks, your Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase. That's where you make a deposit in, and you can take some money out. There's also then the non-depository banks. These offer banking services, but you really cannot necessarily make a deposit. Example, like an insurance company and a pension fund. Pension funds you can make deposits in, not necessarily take money out. Or if you can, there's some fees attached to that. Securities firms, those are kind of like investment companies, investment firms, finance companies, and even pawn shops. For the most part, you can make deposits in, and in some situations you can take money out, but for the most part, you're just putting money in and can't really take cash out. You can take some kind of something out, but generally not cash. How safe is your money? Let's talk about the great run on the banks. Let me see. Here we go. Let me see if this will work here. Gonna get rid of that. Let's get over here. Still. All right, great run on banks. It's like we're still recording, which is good. Let's watch this video here.
In the fractional reserve banking video, only a fraction of the currency in existence is actually tangible, so paper money and coins. Let's assume that Bank A, like any other bank, has customers who trust it with their money for various reasons. Some create bank deposits, some simply keep some spending money in their bank accounts, and so on. These people are legally allowed to go to the bank and take their currency out in the form of paper money. The problem is that most of the currency banks manage doesn't exist physically. For the sake of our discussion, we'll assume 10% of the currency Bank A manages.
If nothing is coming up on this video, which is quite possible, I'm going to pause it right here. I'm going to add all these links onto what I post.
Just is tangible, and we'll also assume it actually keeps that paper money in a vault. If 2 out of 100 customers ask for physical money, the bank can handle it. But what if 20 out of 100 people do it? Naturally, the bank would become insolvent. It just doesn't have that much physical currency.
Remember that word from last week or 2 weeks ago, insolvency?
To make matters worse, the depositors would panic and spread the word, causing a bank run, which is kind of like an infection. As more people find out a bank is in trouble, they tell others, and this might make depositors stop trusting banks in general. Even seemingly healthy banks can be affected because, again, most of their money is not physical. Therefore, governments and central banks do their best to keep depositors at ease. In some places like the US or the European Union, bank deposits are guaranteed up until a certain amount, but that is a topic for another video.
Perfect. Let's get out of this screen here. Let's go back to this. So during the Great Depression, what happened is that there were some insecurities in banks, and basically started with one person who went to the Bank of the United States in New York, and he had a hard time getting his money out. And he told one person, that person told one person. This is before social media, and people did not have the confidence in the banks. So we had a run on the banks. People would just went down to the banks to withdraw the cash. At a certain point, the cash was not there because the banks should, in theory, have, if you put in $100, you put in $100, you put in $100, the bank should have $300. But the banks don't always. Here's how the banks. Want to know how banks make money? Banks make money on the difference between what they give you in interest rates for having the money in the bank and what they charge people in loans. So let's say they would give you, this is just for example, they would give you 3% for interest, and we'll get into that later, for putting their money in their bank. However, if somebody wanted to come in and get a car loan, they would charge that person 8% to borrow their money. So that's that spread. That's how banks make money. So in theory, every time somebody comes in and gives the bank money, they should have that money on hand, but they don't. They right now, actually, the bigger banks, you only have to have 10% cash on hand or in a nearby reserve bank. The rest of it is deposited in other things. So what happened when they had to run the banks, people would literally go into the bank when they just had only cash. The banks would invest their money in other things, and banks basically ran out of money. Now we have something called the FDIC, which can ensure that, which is the next slide here, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This basically insures your money in the bank. They can insure your money per account up to $250,000. So let's say you have 500. You actually can, if you wanted to, you can have yourself and I think 2 other signers on the account, and they would insure up to $250,000 per person. So in a sense, that would be $750,000 to insure money. Anything on top of that, if you had cash, you should have it in something else. You should have it like in IRA, in a CD, in a money market account, in other type of investments. Cash is not. It's not always good to have just cash. It's good to have the liquidity, but not to have everything in just cash. I'll tell you the difference between hard currency and soft currency. In like the US, the European Union, the EU, most developed countries is called hard currency. In developing countries is called soft currency, meaning that countries doesn't have as hard of a value on it. There was, I want to say it was in, maybe it's Iraq or it could have been Libya. I forget where basically I don't know if it was Gaddafi or I can't remember his name. He's just the Saddam Hussein. One of them had money invested in, or they want to change the currency. So basically, they told everybody, we're going to change the currency. Your currency at some point is going to be worthless. So come down to the bank and exchange your old currency, and we'll give you the new currency. What happened? They took all of their existing currency and basically cashed that out for dollars. The new currency was absolutely worthless, and that's because it's a third world country, and they don't really have those guarantees that we have, and they don't have like a central banking system, and FDIC, that kind of stuff. So it can be kind of dicey with some third world countries. Checking accounts. Those are basically just known as a demand deposit, meaning that the bank must permit deposited funds to be withdrawn by the account holder. So basically, you put the money in there, and then you can demand it back. That's what a checking account is. It's just basically it's a demand deposit. Savings account. It's also known as a time deposit, since they should remain on deposit for a longer time. In theory, I know you could basically start a savings account today and take it out tomorrow or anytime you want, but in theory, you should be able to get. You want that money to stay in there a little bit longer. So savings accounts are known as time deposits, since they should remain on deposit for a longer time than a demand deposit / checking account. Interest paying checking accounts. Those are called NOW accounts. It used to be very common. You can get a checking account and you would have a decent amount of interest attached to that. You don't really see that that much anymore because interest rates are so low. NOW account, or a negotiable order of withdrawal. It's just basically checking accounts that the bank pays interest, small amount of interest. Usually you have to have a minimum balance requirement. That's usually a pretty high balance. So in balance, if you don't know, there's certain terms that I'll throw out there that I kind of assume everybody knows, but balance is just how much money you have in your account. If you have $300 in your account, you have a $300 balance. Because there's some basic terms that it took me a while when I was growing up to know what these terms were. So, but usually these kind of NOW accounts require a higher balance. money market deposit accounts. These are just basically interest earning checking accounts with limitations on amount of monthly checks, withdrawals, and checks. So this is just, these are generally tied to an investment or investment firm, investment company that you're affiliated with, where you have all your money with, like, a Charles Schwab, or, it's some type of investment company, and you can earn some interest on your checking account, but there's limitations. You can't just use that as like your normal checking account. You can only usually withdraw a certain amount of certain amount per month, or a certain amount of checks per month. Money market mutual funds. These are just basically, your money is pooled with a lot of smaller investors, and you just like, we'll touch upon that more on the investment side. So let's say you have a money market account, or you have mutual funds. You can have a checking account attached to that where you can withdraw some money, but those are done in predetermined amounts. Like, you can only withdraw in $500, $1,000 increments, because they don't want you to basically use that as your primary source of banking transaction. And here's a good little tip: is that, do you know how banks determine who their best customers are? Their best customers are usually the people who have the highest balances, and they have to service the least. So if you have a lot of money in there and you cause them no problems, you're a great customer. If you have not a lot of money in there, but you're scratching and clawing for every dollar and always complaining, you're not a good customer. It might be noted someplace that, when the time comes, they will have no problem losing your business, because you don't have a lot of money in the bank, and you're causing that bank to use more of their resources, of their tellers' resources, than somebody who has a lot of money in there. It causes them no problems. There's also something called an asset management account. It's similar to a money market account, but it usually requires a higher balance. Is a banking and investment account tied together, and it says is connected to other investment tools that are swept at the end or beginning of the month to the account holder's liking. So let's say you have an account like this. You pretty much have all of your, you could in theory have all of your monthly payments taken out. And I'll say all those monthly payments came to, $6,000. And at the month, those are all swept out. And then the money from your earnings and your other investments automatically go back in there. That's how some of these companies, some of these accounts work. And you could be getting earning interest, but you would have to have a higher balance. Usually you're making a lot of money off of the investment side, and then you kind of have off the side your account that basically pays all your bills. The money comes out to pay the bills, and then it goes back in from your investment side. Electronic banking services, EFTs, electronic funds transfer systems, electronic transfers, direct deposits. Believe it or not, that's part of money management. It's kind of a given. Debit cards, automated teller machines, these are considered electronic banking services. Pre-authorized deposits and payments, those are all part of your banking services. Bank by phone accounts. I mean, it wasn't that long ago even when I was in my teenage years, where you had to plan how much money you wanted for the weekend. You cash out on a Friday. The banks were closed on Saturdays, closed on Sundays, no ATM machines, and you basically have to just kind of plan out how much cash you needed for the weekends. You didn't have. It was a big deal when we got like phone banking, where you can get on the phone, 1-800-GO-WELLS. I remember that. That was the number, the number I would call to find out what my checking account balance was, all the time. So I probably was not a good customer, because I was constantly calling or constantly complaining, or where's this money? How come? What's this fee? Because I was young. I didn't have a lot of money in the bank, and I was always grinding them over what little money I did have in there. So and then online mobile banking, bill payment services are all part of your how you manage your money. Checking accounts, there's an individual or joint. Sometimes if you have a hard time getting a checking account, it's not a bad idea to have a joint account, with a parent or an older brother, older sister. That way you can start and establish yourself at that bank. If you can't, then you kind of transition, you get your individual account. I've had many individual accounts. I've had many joint accounts, joint business accounts, joint accounts with my wife, and plenty of individual accounts as well. General checking account procedures. always write checks in ink, include the name of the person being paid, the date, the amount of the check written in both numerals and word for accuracy, sign the check the same way on the signature card when you opened up the account. If we were in person, you're gonna think this is crazy and kind of stupid. We would do a exercise on how to write a check, because I guarantee you probably maybe 25% of you know how to write a check, and that's not your fault. You don't need to write a check. But there's going to be a time in your life when you're going to have to write a check. And I would just like to show you how to do that. If we were in person, I would do that. I'd hand you a fake check and we would go through that. But it's something that I think everybody should know how to write. Oh, we're gonna go to some cool little videos here. Let's go here. We're gonna get rid of that. Oh, I forgot to go to the FDIC. Let's go back a little bit. What's the FDIC?
It's Paddy Hirsch at Marketplace. The FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is a lot like...
If this video is not playing, I will show the link or share the link.
Severus Snape. Here he is. This is the best that I could do, I'm afraid. You may remember that Snape was Harry Potter's potions teacher at Hogwarts, and a deeply misunderstood fellow, kind of like the FDIC, which is much maligned by a lot of the American public. There are those on the left who claim it's just a big corporate welfare fund for big banks, and those on the right who say it's poorly managed and could end up costing the taxpayer billions of dollars. Now, the FDIC, though, like Severus Snape, has got our best interests at heart. It's got a number of roles, which include regulating some banks, but its main job is to safeguard our savings. And it does this by acting as an insurance fund. Now, it is owned by the government, but it's not funded by the government. It's kind of much more like your health plan, where workers put a certain amount of money into the plan every month. Then if somebody gets sick, the fund managers dip into that pool of money and pay the doctors. In the same way, banks pay money into the FDIC, and then if one of them gets sick or goes bust or runs out of money or whatever it is, then the depositors don't have to worry about their savings because the FDIC will dip into the pool and make them whole up to a certain amount. Now, the big concern about the...
Did you hear he said make them whole? Do you remember what that phrase was from earlier? He indemnifies them. Indemnification.
FDIC is that if a whole bunch of big banks go bust all at the same time, well, then the fund could run out of money, in which case it's going to go to the government, and the government would step in and bail it out with taxpayer dollars. So clearly, just like Severus Snape, the FDIC does have some issues, but it has our best interests at heart. And it was actually very useful during the financial crisis when it really preserved the banking sector and held it together by reassuring depositors that their savings were safe, which is a good thing. Because if we'd all gone running down to the bank to get all of our money out at the same time, it could have left us very badly needing a drink.
Perfect. Good. That would be a run on the banks. Here's another video I forgot to show you guys. This is great. This is really cool. This is the Federal Reserve in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is not a big Federal Reserve. Look at all the cash. It's shocking to see how much cash is there. I want to say in every one of these big bins, there's I want to say $7 or $8 million in each one of these bins. This is just a boring commercial. Or how dare I say boring, it has Matthew McConaughey in it.
So those of us that are in cash love to still say that cash is king.
So this is where your deposits basically go. The cash deposits go from your bank, go to the local Federal Reserve branch. So the bank will only hold a certain amount, about 10% cash on hand. The rest of it, actually probably less than that, but as long as they have 10% in cash reserves, combination of in-store, in-branch, and then at the FDIC.
Cash really does still have a significant role as a payment method. It serves a number of needs for consumers, and so it does really still have a very strong foothold as a very sound and efficient payment method. There's about $1.4 trillion in value of U.S. currency in circulation around the world, and really, I would say from my perspective that, I think U.S. currency is really viewed as very safe and sound and relied upon around the world. And, it still has its place. So it definitely still is an important player. The innovations and things that are coming with payments and mobile, those are certainly starting to impact some of the things we see happening with payments behaviors, but there's still plenty of people that have cash in their wallet that want to use it. I think that really speaks to kind of the reputation of U.S. currency and the overall security features that are there. I think we do a pretty good job. There's always somebody out there trying something, but we do tend to, why the currency does
Look at
tend
all
to
that cash.
be pretty reliable, pretty secure. Currency, we receive in roughly about 111 million in value on a daily basis.
$111 million
We
a
pay
day.
out about
Charlotte, North
124
Carolina.
million a day. In a crisis
How
situation,
much do they pay out?
54 million a day.
How much?
In about 124 million a
They
day.
pay out
In a
$124 million
crisis
a day.
situation, if currency were cut off
Mhm.
coming into the North and South Carolina region, we would be able to sustain the region for about 40 business days. That's typically the way we talk about it. Well, it really would be a crisis type of situation. So think back to like a Katrina situation in New Orleans when there was significant flooding and they had difficulty getting currency just in because roads were closed and things of that nature. So it would have to be something pretty short. Just cash operation in general, we're the 5th largest out of the 28 Fed cash operations.
Wow, crazy. It's a lot of cash. Now, Catch Me, I don't know if you saw the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. The guy who this movie is based on is Frank Abagnale, and he wrote a great book called The Art of the Steal, about how thieves get money and how they cons that they play. And he talks a little bit about the cons that writing checks. You can get at it from writing checks. It's really good.
Today you have great scanners, and there are many ways to fraudulently use a check or alter a check or counterfeit a check. All of these things have become a lot easier to do, once again, because you can buy check paper that's not controlled at any office supply store through mail order catalogs. Today you have great scanners and color copiers with high DPI that are able to replicate just about anything. There are chemicals that allow you to alter things. Checks have changed a lot, that now they're more laser printed than matrix printed. So they're easier to manipulate because you're dealing with toner, not ink. And so they have a lot of ways to remove the toner from the check and rewrite it for a new amount. So ironically, it's amazing for me to say this, but what I did 40 years ago is now 4,000 times easier to do today, because of the technology and the things that are available to criminals that weren't available 40 years ago when I did it.
Kind of scary to see what's going on up there with fraudulent checks. Now here he is again talking about a one little tool that you can get to prevent $2 pen, how that could prevent fraud.
You went to work and this morning you said to your husband, I got to pay the phone bill. And you stuck it in the mailbox, you put the flag up. You went to work, he went to work, kids went to school. They drive to subdivision and go, flag up on this ranch house on the left, check it out. A guy paid his Verizon phone bill, take it. They go home, open it, and sure enough, you got a check in there to Verizon, $128. God forbid, off your money market account. I basically, for argument's sake, Q-Tex nail polish remover. So I take your check, I put a piece of Scotch tape over your signature, turn it upside down, put a piece of Scotch tape on the back where your signature had appeared on the front, lay it in a cake pan, get the Q-Tex nail polish remover, pour the whole bottle over the check. And of course, the check floats to the bottom. Check at the top is written with a $250 Mont Blanc rollerball. The one at the bottom is written with a $150 cross ballpoint. They're sitting in Q-Tex nail polish remover, which is 99.1%.
About 2 minutes left in case there's
acetone is a
nothing on
chemical
the
that
screen.
removes from paper any ink that's not the printer's base ink. So anything you type, laser printed, jet printed, matrix printed, ballpoint, flare pen, gel pen, gone. 15 minutes later, I just take another picture, shake the pan a little bit, and 15 minutes later, I pull out a blank check. I blow dry with a blow dryer. I put it in a book overnight so it dries flat and stable with no wrinkles. In the morning, I take it out, remove the Scotch tape, and have a blank signed check from you. And off I go. That's simple. So today, unfortunately, we're buying checks through the mail for $9 for 200 checks, 99 cents for 200 checks. You're not going to have anything but blank white paper. That's all that check is. If you go to the bank and buy a check, you're paying $18 approximately for 200 checks that come from their check printer. It is bleach sensitive, but that's it, to bleach. Not 21 chemical sensitive. It would be cost prohibitive at that price. So I would only ask you to do what I do. I could carry a $250 Mont Blanc, but instead I carry this pen, the pen they gave you one. It's called a Uniball 207. It's the only pen in the world that when you write with it, it's permanent for the lifetime of the piece of paper that it's written on. This is not water-based or dye-based, it's pigment ink. So it doesn't not only write smoothly, but when you write with it, if you were signing Frank Abagnale, as you write the F, it's permanent for lifetime. There is no chemical on the face of the earth that can remove it. $2, sold anywhere. The bank gave you one as a tool. So if you write checks off a 3-page checkbook, or you have to sign something, you pay selling a car, you write down the mileage, you don't want to change, that's the pen you want to use. You sign or you use this pen. $2 and you eliminate any risk of having your checks washed and having them altered by someone. It's called the Uniball 207. They're sold at drugstores, grocery stores, you name it, around the world, and a great tool.
Uniball 207.
You said to your
All right, so that's Frank Abagnale. Let's catch me if you can. Let's talk about some features of checks. Overdraft. That's basically when you're writing a check for the amount greater than the current account balance. If you need to have overdraft protection. So there are times that, you're going to have situations. I went through situations in my life where through businesses where you knew some checks were going to come through and they weren't going to clear, and because you were waiting for some of the deposits to come in. You had $6,000 going out and only $3,000 or $4,500 in the account before your next deposit hit a few days later of a few $1,000s. So it happens. So if you make sure you get overdraft protection, Wells Fargo was making a killing off of this, and they basically had to kind of really eliminate that overdraft protection. Actually really minimize the amount they were charging. They're that was a whole profit center for them, was overdraft protections. It was basically making money on the people who had the least amount, which was like despicable. Stop payment. You can stop payment on check for a service or good that was defective or faulty. You can order a stop payment with the bank on the check. There's usually a fee associated with this feature. This can kind of happen in a situation. Let's say you have a contractor, or you're having your cabinets done or your floors done or something, and you wrote the person a check and they said, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. They don't do it. They've got the check, and they're going to go cash it or going to go deposit it, but they haven't fulfilled their obligation. If you wanted to, you can stop payment on that check. You would have to deal with what the ramifications of that stop payment later, because they're going to come after you and say, hey, where's our money? But if you wanted to stop payment on a check, you could stop payment on a check. Or if you timed wrong some of your expenses, you can do a stop payment. Basically just say, I want to stop payment on that check that's going out, and the bank will charge you a little bit, but at least you won't get hit with those overdraft fees. Account reconciliation. My grandfather sat me down and just would reconcile your checkbook, and basically be like, here's all the checks, here's everything that's going out, here's everything that's coming in. This is basically balancing your checkbook. Special types of checks. There's a cashier's check. That's basically you give money to the bank. Bank issues a check on your behalf to whatever party you wish. The cashier's check will be guaranteed. People usually use this when the checking accounts are it's requested by somebody else, like a third party, because they might not trust you with the payment. But or if let's say if somebody bounces you a check a couple times or once, say, give me a cashier's check, it's basically going to be guaranteed by the bank. Traveler's checks, it's not as common as it used to be, but traveler's checks, basically when you travel, before you had an ATM card or deposit card or debit card, you'd use your traveler's checks. You go to the bank and you say, hey, give me $100 or $500 in traveler's checks. They would charge you 1 or 2%, and then basically it'd be like this little book of checks, in a sense, that you would give to people along and use it as cash, in a sense. A certified check, it's basically just a personal check that the bank certifies to guarantee the funds are available. This is more of a guarantee for you more than the bank, similar to a cashier's check. But just basically you're certifying that the funds are available. Compound interest. We'll get into compound interest here in a second. That's basically just interest earned in subsequent periods, determined by applying the rate of interest earned in each prior period. It's a fancy way. It's a kind of a confusing definition there, but compound interest is what can make you rich, really, really rich. I'm going to show you a clip here for Dave Ramsey in a second. But that's just basically money just multiplying. There's something called, we'll get into a little bit later, called the rule of seven, which means if you get roughly about 10% return, meaning you make 10% off of your investment. So if you put $100 in a year and you made 10%, I mean, at the end of that year for doing nothing, just putting your money in, you would have $110. In 7 years from putting in, depositing your money and just keeping it in there, if it made 10%, roughly 10% every year, in 7 years, that $100 would be $200, okay, with doing nothing with it. So it's like the rule of seven, and that has to do with compounding interest. Simple interest is basically it's interest that's paid only on the initial amount of deposit. You don't want that, because that's basically when you have simple interest. If you put money in the bank, you only get paid interest at one time. Let's say it said they're going to give you 5% interest on $1,000, but you're gonna make what, $50? No, you want something that's going to be compounded consistently. Your nominal stated rated interest, it's just the promised rate of interest paid on a savings deposit or charge on a loan. It's pretty straightforward. The effective rate of interest, the annual rate of return that is actually earned or charged during the period the funds are held. Wait, I screwed up with this. Earned or charged during the period the funds are held or borrowed. So that's basically like a consistent interest rate you would have if you had like a car loan, student loan, home loan. That's kind of what that's for, is you have your effective rate of interest. Let me play you this great. Now I'm going to play a clip of the guy by the name of Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, I'll play you some clips of his. This is about a 4-minute clip. Dave Ramsey is somebody who I believe about 40% of what he says. But he's spot on with some things. And I think it's important for you to and I want to expose him to you just so you can start thinking, because most people have not thought about this stuff. And even if you watch this stuff and you don't believe it, that's okay, that's fine. But just start thinking about money a little bit differently. This is him talking about building wealth and compounding interest. It's about 4.5 minutes. If I play this and it does not play on the shared screen, no, it's about 4.5 minutes long, and I will share this link with you guys after this lesson and lecture.
Radical explosion. Einstein said that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Now, compound interest is simply this. You take your money down to the bank. Let's take this $1,000, and we take it down to the bank, and we put the money in the bank. Now, you leave it there, and it earns interest, and you leave the interest there. The next year, you earn interest on the $1,000 and on the interest. The next year, you earn interest on the $1,000, on the interest, and on the interest, and you leave it there again. The next year, you earn interest on the $1,000, on the interest, on the interest, and on the interest, and then you leave it there again. That's what compound interest is. The trick with investing is you got to start, and you got to start right now. You got to get started. So we're going to get the $1,000 out of the way. We're going to get the emergency fund built as quickly as we can. We're going to get you out of debt, and then we're going to get you investing as fast as we can in these baby steps, because time needs to be on your side. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's look at Ben and Arthur for a minute. Ben starts saving money at 19 years old. He saves $2,000 a year. He does that all the way up until age 26. At age 27, you will notice Ben puts in zero. Say zero. At 27, he quits putting money in, but he's got the pump primed. The snowball is there. It's starting to roll down the hill, and every time it rolls over, it picks up more snow because it's a bigger ball each time it rolls over. Then his brother Arthur on the other side, he looks up and says, ooh, Ben's saving money. I need to save money. He starts saving money at age 27. Now, let's fast forward all the way to the end of the story at age 65 and see what happens. What happens is, at the end of the story, Ben has put in $16,000 and has ended up with $2,200,000. Arthur who put in $78,000 only ends up with $1,500,000. The guy who put in $78,000 later ends up with $700,000 less than the guy who put in $16,000 earlier. Some of you are looking at that and going, that's a real nice chart if I was 19. Well, let me tell you this. If you're in here and you're under 25 years old and you grasp what I just showed you intellectually to the point that it drops from your brain into your heart and changes your behaviors, I just made you a multimillionaire. You shouldn't be allowed to graduate from college or high school without being able to explain that chart. It would change America if people understood that chart. So what are we going to do? Well, if you're under 25, I just gave you a hint. Some of you in here like me, you're like over 45. If you're over 45, raise your hand. You probably have a message for those in here that are under 25. You're probably wanting to say something to them like, do it. 1, 2, 3. Wow. Young people, did you hear the voice of regret? One lady said, am I too old to save money? Not if you're still sucking wind. It's not over until you quit. Colonel Sanders never fried any chicken until he was 67 years old. Started Kentucky Fried Chicken as a 67-year-old. Why? Because he couldn't live on a Social Security check. Grandma Moses never painted a painting until she was 85 years old. She did 1,500 works of art, 450 of which she did after age 100. A couple of summers back, my family and I was blessed to get to visit Rome, and one of the tours we went on was through the Vatican. And across the back wall of the Vatican is a thing about 3 times the size of this area. On the back wall, this masterpiece of the return of Christ at the end of times. And our tour guide told us that that was painted there by a 78-year-old Michelangelo. It's not over until you quit. But with this money stuff, it's a lot easier if you'll get started now. The sooner you start, the less it takes and the easier it is, because you establish that discipline, you establish that pattern in your life.
All right. Hopefully that's something that you guys can think about. Start now. I think everybody who's older would tell you, start saving that money. Save it now. Put it away. Have a plan. If you don't even have a plan, we'll get into that a little bit more. 10%. Just think about that 10%. 10% of whatever you earn automatically off the top gets put into savings. If you start with those kind of habits early, you'll be in pretty good shape. And you know what? And like I said, it's never too late. It's never too late. And it's very easy, like I've said before, is to money shame people and to think, oh, this person doesn't have enough money in savings. My parents didn't do this. My family did this. My brother screwed this up. My sister screwed that up. Or even yourself. Don't money shame other people. Don't money shame yourself. People, for the most part, make the best financial decisions they can given their situation, given their circumstances. Right now is a tough time. And I know people have to, focus on, hey, how am I going to eat? How am I going to keep the lights on? How am I not going to get kicked out of this house or apartment? And there's some different priorities. But as long as you can start to know these things and start thinking about these things and start planning for your future, you might not be able to put the action steps in place, but just if you start thinking about it, then you're a lot farther ahead than you were and before you took this class. So that's about it for this class. Hopefully everything that I put on there is going to be on the video or the lecture as far as the videos go. If it's not, and then the shared screen thing did not work, then I will just share those links with you separately with the announcement. So once again, hey, this was chapter 4. I will 1, 2, 3, 4. You get 5 on later in the week. No, actually I gave you 3 already, I believe, or this is 4. You'll get 5 Wednesday, I believe, or maybe I'm just all screwed up right now, who knows. So this is chapter 4. I'll catch up with you guys later in the week. Have a great rest of the week. If you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me. Bye.